Hello, everyone, and welcome to another success interview of e-GMAT. Today, we have with us Mr. Saket, who has scored a beautiful 750 with a split of Q51 and a V40. So thank you, Saket. Thank you for joining in today.
Thank you, Ava. Thanks so much for the formal introduction. And again, thanks a big to the e-GMAT team for helping me through the journey.
Thank you. Thank you. So Saket, help us understand. So how does it feel to finally have achieved that 750? What was your reaction when you really saw that scores on the screen?
So I think initially when I was giving my mocks, starting from the e-GMAT mocks, and I think it's a very versatile tool,
Hmm.
especially going from a course perspective. The mocks from the e-GMAT, I started with a 710, if I remember 710,
Hmm.
and then I pushed it to a 740. And in the actual mock, I got a 750. So I use the course mostly from the verbal side.
Hmm.
And starting from say like a V39, if I remember, in the actual first GMAT mock,
Hmm.
and then I think it was a V41 or something, if I
Yeah.
remember V41,
Yeah.
and then in the actual actual exam I got a V40. So I
Yeah.
think it's a very consistent tool to
Hmm.
gauge, and at the same time the feedback which I got from you, that definitely helped me a lot to get to a 750 score. My
Okay.
reaction was, given that I had given the GMAT once,
Hmm.
my last score was a 720.
Yeah.
So from going from 720 to a 750, and I was like, my target was fixed at a 750. So
Hmm.
anything like even a 740 was, I felt like, I have to give my 100% to
Hmm.
get to a 750,
Yes.
and I'm really really glad to have achieved that. So
Great.
thanks again.
Great. Great. So, Saket, you mentioned that you have previously given GMAT, right? And
Yes.
from what I recollect, you gave it last year also, and you landed up at a 720 with a V38 and a Q50, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
what was your approach back then, and how did you decide to choose e-GMAT for your test prep?
So basically, last time when I'd given the GMAT, most of my approach was based on the official questions
Hmm.
and some YouTube seminars, free YouTube seminars here and there. So I
Okay.
had attended a free seminar by e-GMAT, and
Hmm.
then as I was like, okay, so the approach that which they give, especially for the SC content, the
Hmm.
meaning-based approach, and in one or two questions I saw, and I was like, okay, so this is how I'm supposed to solve, and I think that when you get to grammatically correct answers and then you have to eliminate one of them based
Hmm.
on the intended meaning, that is something which I never seen before the e-GMAT course.
Okay.
So I
Hmm.
think that was one of the primary key drivers. I was like, okay, so this is a course which I should go opt for.
Hmm.
But I think I had seen that seminar like 5 or 7 days before the exam, so there was
Hmm.
practically no time last time to join. So I was like, okay, I'll go ahead with this, with the official mocks and
Yeah.
the official questions, and I
Hmm.
ended up with a 720
Yeah.
with a Q50 and a V38. So my approach was mostly from the verbal side, was solving as many questions as I can.
Hmm.
And given that, I did not have any digital platform to sign. So it was mostly like I used to do on a hard copy and a hard book
Okay.
page. So I think by itself, the nature was pretty, it was very hard to, maintain an error log. So I was not maintaining any error log. It was mostly like, in my memory, and I
Hmm.
think that was a very non-structured approach to maintain like a verbal guide.
Hmm. Hmm. So Saket, help us understand, like since you mentioned about the error log, right?
Yeah,
Now we
yeah,
are talking about 2021, it's gone, you are at a 720. Now
yeah,
2022, you decide to start with the e-GMAT platform, right? So when you
yeah.
specifically talk about the error log, what exactly does a error log help you in? And what are the details that you are actually filling in the error log?
So basically, with my error log, I had devised it into three different tabs. So one
Okay.
was for CR, one was
Hmm.
for SC, one for RC. Uh, the first tab was obviously like the link, whichever question I'm doing, or the name
Hmm.
of the question. The
Okay.
second was the difficulty level,
Hmm.
basically like whether I split it into 600, 700,
Okay.
700, 800, and
Okay.
500, 600. The third was the how much timing I was taking,
Hmm.
like how much time I used to take to solve each question. The fourth aspect was, like what type of question. For example, in SC, it could be like a modified question. For
Yeah.
CR, it can be like a strengthen or a weaken question.
Hmm.
The next five were the option choices, which I chose, and
Okay.
why I did not take an option choice. Why did I choose an option choice? So it was a very detailed and comprehensive error log this time around, which I maintain thanks to
Hmm.
the e-GMAT course. And the last option was the correct option, and
Yeah.
the finding and the rationale given by the e-GMAT tutor as to why they have chosen the option choice. And based on
Okay.
that, I could compare what was my reasoning to select the choice versus what was the reasoning of the tutor.
Hmm.
So not only I was able to get that, okay, my answer choice matches there, but I was also able to get into the tutor's mind, and I could revisit that question, that okay, I
Yes.
chose it for the right reason rather than
Hmm.
just being like, it feels good or it sounds good. So I think that detailed one level down approach, I think definitely helped me with respect to the air log. And I
Yes.
think on point of the air log, maintaining air log is, I think, the one of the single most important factor that helped me push from 720 to a 750.
Hmm.
Given that I used to solve a lot of questions on, say, the official questions and on the GMAT club, but I never maintained like an error log, as I said. So I
Yeah.
had really, so every time I was solving it, I was just checking the answer. I was checking, okay, this is the right, and I used to move on. I did
Yeah.
not used to spend that extra 1.5 minute to realize, okay, if a similar question is given, and if you just reverse from a subject to object, if you invert it, the question is going to remain the same and the answer is going to remain the same. But then
Yeah.
I never realized this, like, and I
Hmm.
think because of the error log, I never maintained it. So I
Hmm.
think from that perspective, it genuinely helped me a lot.
Great, great. So, Saket, you have used majorly our platform for the verbal part, right?
Yes.
Quants was already strong for you. You were landing up consistently on a Q50, Q51, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
the verbal is something that we shall be breaking down now, right? So,
Yeah.
you were following an approach, and that to a certain extent was working for you because you were at a V38 even when you started on our platform, right?
Yeah.
But we also understand that V38 to V40 takes a lot of efforts,
A
right?
lot of
That last 2 points or the last 3 points is what you actually put in a lot of efforts into, right? So you have
yeah.
gone through the verbal course. So help us understand. Let's start with SE, right? Because you have
Yeah.
mentioned you were maintaining the error logs for SC, CR, and RC continuously. So what was the approach difference that you took? Like, if you could help us with a certain examples, I think that would be great, right? So let's start with SE.
Sure. So my first day with e-GMAT, I took a
Hmm.
mock, Sigma X mocks, and I
Okay.
realized, where I was faltering. So they have a very detailed mock analysis and a very detailed section-wise breakdown. So in fact, even for SC, they were telling me that, you have this much percentile in SC, you have this much in RC, and this one in CR. So I think
Hmm.
that level of, analysis is something, again, that's not in the official mock. So I think that's
Hmm.
something, definitely people should check out. So with respect to the SC side, I started, I think, with an 81 percentile or something, 80,
Okay.
81 percentile in the, in the first mock. And
Yeah.
then I went and I re-attempted the question which I did wrong. So for example, if there was some modified question which I had done wrong, or there was some comparison error or some
Hmm.
parallelism error, then I used to check their, the module. So in e-GMAT, as you know, there are different module. One is for, comparison, one is for parallelism, and there it break down into certain aspects, so that I knew
Yeah.
that if I am wrong, if I'm not doing too well in this concept, I can just refer to that particular module instead of
Yeah.
going it like the entire thing. So I think the modular approach is a very efficient use of time. So I could
Hmm.
quickly glance and I could quickly check where my concepts are, there's a gap in my concept, and I could
Hmm.
quickly make sure to
Yeah.
improve them. So
Yes.
with respect to SC, that was one thing which helped me going to the modular approach. The second thing which helped me majorly was the intended meaning approach. That's
Hmm.
something which I think that's something which has actually helped me in my GMAT as well, because there were questions regarding that. So I think
Hmm.
so basically it's regarding what the author is trying to say
Yeah.
versus what the meaning you are trying to derive. So
Hmm.
there will be many questions where there are like two grammatically correct options, but then you have to, based on your judgment and based on what the author is trying to say, you have to come down to one choice. I think
Yes.
that is something which especially given the meaning based approach, there I think there's an entire section. The last section is towards that
Hmm.
miscellaneous topic section regarding that. I think that is something which I revisited twice,
Hmm.
because that's a very dense session. And I think that also helped me quite a lot in SC.
Okay, great, great. I am really happy to see that you were actually able to apply the meaning-based approach, and I think it really fairly worked out for you. So, what about RC? What was your strategy, and how were you approaching the RC questions? Because in RC, it's not about a single question, you have an entire passage, and based upon that, you're really looking into the questions, right? So, what was your approach for RC?
So with respect to RC, I was going about like I completed the entire course module because for me RC was something I was a bit dicey at.
Hmm,
So I started going from top down approach. Like basically every module I finished it, I took the quiz. I
hmm,
realized okay, this is my percentile in that particular module, and then I moved to the next module. At the same time, the links given by the LMP team, I think Harsha from
yes,
e-GMAT. So
yes,
he has helped quite a bit, and there was this like focus on the keywords approach, basically
yes.
pre-thinking approach. I think that helps quite a bit both in RC as well as CR.
Hmm,
As soon as you get a question, and whenever there are like certain keywords used, like say justly, which means that the author is agreeing to what has already been said. It's just a
hmm,
small word, but if you miss it, then I think you miss the entire sense of the question, and you get it wrong. So I think focusing on the keyword has been quite a good strategy for me on the RC. At the
hmm.
same time, initially I used to skim the passages. And I think that's a
Okay.
major reason why I used to, be like, let's finish it in 2 minutes, let's finish it in 2.5 minutes. And then I
Hmm,
used to quickly go into the question. And then I used to, get confused between the option choices. And then I used to bounce back into the. So I think in a
yeah.
way, it was a very, like a flawed approach. It takes more
Hmm,
time, it
hmm,
brings down your accuracy. But given that I went to the e-GMAT approach, and I think that makes quite a lot of sense. I think there was no like skimming or anything. They were like read the passage, understand it,
hmm.
jot down the summary, and then you look at the each paragraph in context to the overall summary. So I
Yeah.
think better understanding of the passage definitely helped a lot.
Great, great. And Saket, once you were done with the subsections, right? Because now you have the conceptual knowledge, you understand what is the approach to be practiced, right? How
Yes.
so? How did you go about the application? What kind of questions were you solving on the platform or outside as well?
So basically, I was using Scholaranium,
Hmm.
the e-GMAT tool, and I was basically looking at medium and hard questions. Given
Okay.
that I had a 720, so I was looking at the more medium and hard questions. And
Hmm.
after every question, I was like, I was doing it in strictly the time limit. Like
Okay.
for example, 2 minutes for CR, and I think around 2 minutes for RC as well. And
Hmm.
for I think for SC it was 1.5 minutes, so that's what like standard time set by the e-GMAT team. And
Yeah.
from there on, I used to look at okay, if I'm getting a hard question wrong, that I used to look analyze into it what types. But if I was getting a medium question wrong, I think that was a big concern for me because a medium question wrong, which means you're getting something in the 600 700 reason wrong, which you don't ideally want to get wrong.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's something which is like low hanging fruits. You can easily
Hmm.
get them right once you have like another go at it. So I
Hmm.
think that was my approach from a from a more strategy perspective. I was trying to get the easier questions out of the way, and then I
Hmm.
was focusing on the difficult topics. For example, I realized that from the SC I had certain issues with the parallelism
Hmm.
from
Okay.
concept because every mock or every quiz I was getting one question wrong out of parallelism. So I
Hmm.
revisited the module and then I realized it. Okay, so like you can only compare comparison and parallelism because they go hand in hand. So you can only compare like very logical entities. I think that was something like I realized after taking the mocks. That's something
Okay.
which I improved on.
Okay. So, Saket, you were also part of the last mile push program at e-GMAT, right?
Yes, yes,
And the
yes,
first, before getting into the program, you were at a 710 with your scores at a Q47 and a V39, right?
yes,
So,
yes,
you were telling about how you approached this 710 mock, right? So, could
yes.
you help us understand more about that?
Yeah, sure. So that was like the first mock, which, as I said, which I took before I joined the LMP program, and
Hmm.
that was basically regarding. So I was always, conscious of the time limit which I was given, and as I
Hmm.
mentioned, RC, I was skimming it. I think that led to like a 1 or 2 point decrease from like a V39, and at the same time, I was like, SC, I should not be spending more than 1.5 minutes. I think this was something with a strict time limit which I had set for myself during the
Hmm.
mock. And then I realized it, if you want to finish into 1 minute and 30 seconds, you have to be crystal clear with like the meaning based approach, because there always will be two correct options and you have to eliminate one. I
Yeah.
think that is something which, I went back to the module, and I went back to the resource which you gave me after I joined the LMP.
Hmm.
And then, I was able to make like quick elimination options out of those two correct choices. So I
Hmm.
think in a way, the after joining the LMP, it was a very structured approach
Okay.
compared towards the end. And I
Hmm.
think that definitely helped me, narrow down my, time constraints. And overall, you can see that, the gap shifted like from V39 to like from 720 to 750. I think
Hmm.
that was a big bonus for me.
Yeah. So, Saket, what you are essentially trying to say is that you were able to identify because you were at a 710, 720. So, but there were still loopholes, right? When I say loopholes,
Yes.
there were topics maybe you were going wrong with the accuracy or the timing issue, right? So, we could identify those for the last 10 days and really work on them with a focused approach, right?
Yes, definitely. The last 10 days, I think last 10 days, given the detailed approach you're saying, doing only like 10 questions or 15 questions, then analyzing them again, and then going again, doing the official question, and then back again. I think that was a very good, because when I was doing the scholarly question, I was gaining the
Hmm.
aptitude, I was gaining the skills, I was gaining the time constraint, and then I was applying it on the official mocks. So
Yeah.
I think on the official question, I think that was a very I think that was a very good approach. And now when I look at it into hindsight, I think that definitely helped boost confidence as well.
Yeah. So, Saket, mocks play a very important role when we talk about GMAT, right? Because they actually put you in a zone and you get familiar to what the entire GMAT system can be like, right? Before you are attempting the test. So, let's talk about how many official mocks or Sigmax mocks did you actually go ahead with before your exam date?
So I went about around two Sigma X mocks and
Okay.
about two official mocks.
Okay.
So the scoring was very consistent.
Hmm.
Like I could see consistent progressions, and that's why I felt like the e-GMAT mocks, I think, are very similar to the OG mocks in a way.
Okay.
Especially for the verbal part. If you see,
Hmm.
there was not much difference between the scoring which I got from the e-GMAT mocks as well as the Sigma X mocks, as
Okay.
well official mocks. So I think from that perspective, mocks definitely play a big role, because it's one thing to solve a question in isolation within 2 minutes. It's
Yeah.
another thing when you're under time pressure and the clock is ticking, and you can actually see it, and then you're
Hmm.
like, okay, I have to solve it, I have to get it right. And I think that kind of panic, I think it's quite evident. Even in my mocks, I used to face that. But I think
Hmm.
the more mocks one solves, I think you get better used to it. You be like, okay, for example, if I take more time in say RC or CR, then you can
Yeah.
obviously make up for it during the SC, if you're provided your SC concepts are pretty solid. So I think
Yeah.
that's something which I realized after doing analysis of the mocks.
Okay. And what about the sequence? Like, were you following the same sequencing throughout your mocks? When I say sequence, like the quants verbal, right? Were you sticking to the same sequence in the mocks as well as your GMAT?
Yes. So I started with the verbal,
Hmm.
because for me verbal was a challenge. So I was
Okay.
like, as I'm fresh, I'll start with the verbal, and then I'll move to quants, and then I'll take the analytical section towards the end. So I think that approach
Hmm.
is very consistent in all the four mocks which I
Okay. So the main reason why you started with verbal is because it's weaker and you're starting with a fresh mind, is it? So you wanted to tackle
Yes,
that first and then get into your strengths.
exactly. So I think to starting that was especially because it's a I think for me it was a very hard section. So
Hmm.
65 minutes on the clock, and the first question, and the difficulty increases. So for me, I was like, I'll warm up a few questions before I start the mocks. So before I
Okay.
start the exam, so I used to do like two questions of SC, two of CR, and one of RC, and
Hmm.
then I used to go to the test center, and then I think that's how it worked out
You
well
were
for me.
able to replicate the same,
Yes,
right? Okay,
yes.
great, great, great. So, Saket, what would be that one thing that you have really learned from this journey, right? Because you have been preparing for quite some time now and you were already up there to a certain extent also, right? So what is that one learning that you really felt made a difference for you this time?
So the one learning which I would say is, going from a 720 to a 750. I think every 10, point push towards the end, I think that's the harder journey, because
Hmm.
going from 700 to a 720 is hard. But when
Yeah.
you're going from 720 to a 740 or 750, I think that push becomes like exponentially pretty hard, because you
Hmm.
cannot afford to miss only one question. One
Yeah.
question can be a difference between 750 and a 740, and then going forward now. So I think for me it was mostly like, I'll try to get at least all the medium questions right and all the easy ones right, and I was
Hmm.
trying to hit an accuracy of say 60%,
Yeah.
in the Scholarinium on the hard test. Exactly. So, I think that was the benchmark set,
Yeah.
like so that we can accomplish the goal. And I think sticking to that benchmark consistently is the one key thing which I would say, to get the success out of it. I
Hmm.
think being consistent is the one factor. Like even on
Yeah.
days when I felt like, I'm getting overwhelmed, I don't want to read another RC passage, but then I knew somewhere down that, I had to do it because you
Yes.
know because it's if you drop out, then you lose that consistency, and then again you have to get in the zone again. I think that's
Yeah.
something that definitely helped me.
So, Saket, it's very interesting that you talk about consistency, because we at e-GMAT also say that consistency needs to be maintained, right? Because whenever there are gaps, you would have to revisit those particular files, and that takes that extra time and effort also, right? So,
Yes.
ours wise, what was the commitment that you were putting in? Because were you on a break while you were preparing for GMAT, or were you full time working as well?
No, I was actually working full time towards
Okay.
the end. Yes. So I did take like a couple of holidays here and there, but I was still working. So I'm not on a break as such. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, the approach was on weekdays. I used to, accommodate 1.5 to 2 hours. So approximately my time limit was 2 hours. And on the weekends, I used to focus on around like 3 to 4 hours approximately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And most of the time, it was more like 2 hours of solving question and 2 hours of error analysis. Because
Okay.
again, I just want to iterate that error analysis is a very big part of playing. So I
Yeah.
think
Yes.
people should not miss on that.
They should not. They should not, definitely.
Yeah.
And what, let's talk about your GMAT, right? Your
Yes.
recent attempt, your 750, right?
Yes.
So why don't you just break it down? How did you start going ahead with the questions? And were there any specific questions? You used a particular technique that worked out for you? And let's start with your sequence that you said. You start with verbal, right?
Yes.
So how you went there, you started your exam. So what was your approach?
So basically, I started with the verbal,
Hmm.
and initially I was like, I knew somewhere that the initial 5 6 questions will be the medium level questions.
Hmm.
So and then I was like, okay, I can probably do it quickly. I can do it
Okay.
within like say 1 minute 40 seconds or 1 minute 45 seconds, so that
Hmm.
I can allocate more time to the RC and the CR questions.
Yeah.
And then the initial approach was that, and then I could see that the questions started becoming tougher. The seventh and the eighth question, I remember I was like,
Hmm.
okay, so these are like tougher questions and they need more time allocated. But in a way, it's a good thing because then I realized, okay, so I am doing relatively well. And at certain point, I was like, okay, I'm giving like 2 minutes to a SC question, but I think that question deserves those 2 minutes. So I
Yeah.
think from that approach, and then starting on from the CR, I think
Hmm.
pre-thinking approach is what I followed quite a bit. So
Okay.
I used to read the question stem,
Hmm.
which is a strengthener or a weakener or an assumption. And
Yeah.
based on that, you can say, okay, for an assumption question, you have to pre-think quite. It's a very effective strategy. Like
Hmm.
this is what the author is saying. So and then I should draw the conclusion, and then I used to read the passage, and then even before looking at the answer choice, I was
Hmm.
able to narrow down. Okay, this is probably along the lines of what the correct answer will be. So based on
Okay.
that approach is something which helped speed in the long run.
And what about your quants?
So for quants, I was like, like decently familiar with the quants, given that I've given quite a mocks. And for quants, I was mainly focusing on the official question itself. So I had
Hmm.
a decent understanding that, these are the levels of questions, these are the type of questions which I'll be seeing. And
Hmm.
obviously, DS, obviously, data sufficiency is something which I focus quite a bit on because those are the actual tricky ones which can be
Yeah.
because along the PS side there is some guessing work. The last digit you can probably guess and you can do something, but on the DS side it's something which you have to be actually involved in solving. So there is
Yeah.
no like you cannot lapse or you cannot like I think the guesswork does not work that much there. So I think
Hmm.
from that perspective, I'd focus quite a bit on the DS side. And I
Hmm.
think there was obviously time markers. So for verbal, my time markers was 55 minutes 6 questions,
Okay.
44 minutes 12 questions. So every
Hmm.
6 question I allocated 11 minutes. On the
Okay.
quants, I was mostly divided into the sets of 10 10 10 questions each.
Okay. So when you
So
talk
one
about
third
the
time.
timing, because you mentioned that 11 min, that,
Yes.
yes. So I want to understand, like, did the timing vary with the difficulty level as well? Because definitely the time that you spent on a medium would be different from that you might take for a
Yes,
hard,
definitely.
right? So were you very
Yes.
particular about that timing, that you will take only this much, or you did become a little flexible when it came to the difficulty level?
I did become flexible when it comes to the
Yeah.
difficulty level, given that the first 6 question did not take 11 minutes. It's take probably like 8 or 9 minutes.
Yes.
But the first
Yes.
6 question. But then towards the end, obviously I was spending a little more time, and in the middle portion. So I think my approach basically on the verbal front was, getting as much questions right in the first, say, 15 or first 16 questions, so
Hmm.
that sets you up that, okay, you are at this level. And then, towards the end, I would say, if someone wants to, if you're running out of time, and if you want to apply that the guessing technique, which
Yeah.
which you talked about, I think it's safer to do it in the middle questions, like something on question 20 or question 25,
Hmm.
rather than doing it either towards the very end or toward doing it toward total beginning. I think
Okay.
I applied that approach.
Okay. So what you were saying is that the first three blocks you were very aggressive and you were trying to get
Yes.
more of the questions right, right? You were a little
Yes.
flexible with your timings, and the last block where you figured out there's less of
Yes.
time, maybe a few questions are still left, you
Yes.
went ahead and guessed them, is it?
A few guessing. Yes. That's
Okay. Okay.
that's very
So,
good.
Saket, what, like, if you have to tell something, like, because you already mentioned that consistency is something that really worked for you, right?
Yes.
Throughout, no
Yeah.
matter what your mind said, you really got back and you really kept going throughout the preparation, right? So,
Yeah.
is this a mantra that you would suggest the other aspirants also? Because 750 is a very dream score, right? I think 740 plus is something that everyone targets, right?
Yeah.
So is there
Yeah.
something particular that you would want others also to follow that really worked for you, like apart from consistency?
I would say, following, I would say, first of all, maintaining an error log, as I already mentioned before.
Hmm.
Maintaining
Okay.
that would be a key strategy. And I would say, apply that, for example, if you're identifying this is your weakness,
Yeah.
take that question out of the, say, the e-GMAT course or something, take that question
Hmm.
out and try to solve it on the OG question. Apply the same strategy on the OG, because
Okay.
that
Yeah.
helps you strengthen their mind. At the
Hmm.
same time, I remember in e-GMAT there's a cementing, if I'm not wrong, cementing quiz, a cementing
Yeah.
section.
Cementing stage.
Yes,
Yes, the second
cementing
stage.
stage.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that helped me quite a bit as well, because I knew
Hmm.
somewhere that, I was around this much percentile and all. But when you solve, that, say, I think it had like 30 questions, 18 questions, if I'm not wrong,
Hmm.
on the cementing
Then
quiz. And if you
yeah, you
tend to, yeah, but I'm like, if you talk sectional wise, all the section combined.
yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And when you solve that in the given time frame, it gives you a very just idea that, for SC, this is my percentile. For RC,
Yeah.
this is my percentile, and this for CR, this is my percentile. And based on that, you can actually target, for each subsectional, you can have like a 90 percentile or 92 percentile or 96 percentile, depending on what is your weakness and what is your strength. For me,
Hmm.
for, say, SC was a strength, so I was like,
Yeah.
okay, for me, SC should be like the highest, accuracy which I want to, ability which I want to achieve,
Hmm.
followed by
Hmm.
CR, followed by RC. So I think in that way, I think for me that worked out. And when I look at my ESR, I think that's exactly how it worked out.
Okay.
So
Okay. So I think you really followed the platform specifically with respect to verbal. And I think what really
yes,
worked out for you was that I think given the stipulated time, you were able to identify your weak areas, right? Like you mentioned before, also, you had that willingness to go back to those modules, maintaining those error logs. You were actually consistently doing that throughout your preparation. That really worked out for you, right?
yes, definitely. I think error log, consistency, meaning based approach, and just following that, towards the end. And I think the inevitable part of verbal for me, I had to guess like a one or two questions, because I
Hmm.
would, in order to maintain that accuracy, I think I did have to guess one or two questions. But I think you have to be okay with it. If you're spending
Hmm.
more than 1.5 minutes, I think you have to be okay to moving on with that question, rather than,
Yeah.
sticking to that question.
Hmm.
Because it's ultimately, it's not about the sectional ability, it's about your overall verbal ability. So even if you
Yeah.
get that question right at the cost of some other question, you're still losing. So I think that's
Yeah.
something which I realized.
Yeah, I think that's a very right way to put it also, because we always, like, while giving the exam, we always have the tendency that we want to get everything right, right? And
Exactly.
sometimes we get stuck to a question, we keep at it, and we forget that we could have just skipped and worked on other questions with higher
Exactly.
difficulty level and could have scored better, right?
Yeah,
So I think
exactly.
that also worked out for you, because I think from the mock stage itself you were replicating this behavior, right? I think you started letting go of a few questions here and there where you
Yes,
thought that you're not able to find a path forward even
exactly.
after attempting for a certain time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think e-GMAT is something known as the tact time, the TAKT time.
Yeah.
Basically, the time
Tag time.
after which, if you're not able to attempt it, you should basically pass on. So
Hmm.
that's something I used to look at. It's around like 1 minute 20 seconds. 1 minute, I think, for the SC. So if you're not able to understand it in 120, that if you can't see a forward path approach, like
Yeah.
for example, there are like three answer choices and you're unable to make sure that you're getting it, then I think it's probably time to move on to use the time. Because even if you spend one more minute on it, it's very it's not very probable that you'll get the
Yeah,
right answer. So I think
yeah.
saving that time to say some CR question, I think that's a better approach.
True, true, true. I think it's a very risky call that one needs to consciously take to just move on,
Yes,
right? Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So, Saket, thank you for your time and your valuable inputs. And I'm sure that all the details that you shared with us today would be very helpful for the other students also who are looking forward to a score like 750 like yours, right? So, thank you for joining in, Saket, today.
Thank you so much, Arya. Thanks to EG team. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.